I would like to call to order the Tuesday, January 16th meeting of the City of Monona City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder DePulo.
Here.
Alder Holmquist.
Here.
Alder Moore.
Here.
Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder Rademacher.
Here.
Alder Bernstein.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And just as we start, City Administrator Steck Schulte and Finance Director Hotaker are both with us via Zoom this evening. So they're here to answer questions or whatever. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the January 3rd meeting?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any corrections or additions?
Yeah, I have one.
Doug?
On page 4, under item G2A, relating to the updating the fees, I would like to add that I had asked the fire chief about the reason why we changed to non-resident, or to make no difference. So I had asked the fire chief about why we're no longer going to have different rates for residents versus non-residents, and he indicated there was some legal issues potentially with doing that, and so I would just like to add in.
Anything else? Okay, all in favor for approving the minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I have a sheet for one appearance. Does anyone else here like to make an appearance? Okay, Tenley Thomas, if you'd like to, should she come up to the table, or, yeah, if you'd just like to come up and take a seat at the table here.
All the way.
There's a microphone here that you can speak into.
Yeah. And she would like to speak against the Monona police pursuit policy. If you could identify yourself and
Okay.
start.
My name is Tenley Thomas. I was born and raised in Madison, and I'm currently a Dane County 911 dispatcher. And I just so happened to be working the night of January 1st, 2024, when the crash happened. And I just wanted to come here and give my observations in a statement. So I have been a 911 dispatcher for over 5 years in Dane County. I've dispatched Madison Police since 2021. I have heard and aired out innumerable police chases on the radio, a lot of them being initiated by Monona Police, having chases weekly, if not nightly. Many of their pursuits, the Monona Police, they lose sight of the people they're chasing, proven to be a waste of time and a waste of resources, but I digress. The Monona Police are paid public servants who take an oath to protect and serve their community and take on the responsibility of keeping the public safe, which includes the people they are attempting to apprehend. The Monona Police Department should be de-escalating situations and terminating pursuits when necessary in order to reduce the risk of injury and death. Monona's current pursuit policy is reckless and dangerous and needs to be revised immediately. There's no reason for Monona Police to chase people to the point that they crash and die, especially if they haven't committed any violent felonies. The deadly crash that occurred on January 1st, 2024 was a direct result of a Monona Police pursuit and has been the most horrendous incident of recklessness by police I've seen in my 5 years of working in public safety. 3 people lost their lives that night because Monona Police decided to chase them and they didn't have to. Choosing to pursue a vehicle at extremely high rates of speed down residential streets is crazy from a public safety standpoint. Monona Police created a situation that could have had several more victims. What if the victims or the officers would have crashed and rolled over into somebody's house? What if they or the officers would have hit a pedestrian walking across the street or a car going through one of the many intersections in that area? Sorry, I'm nervous.
That's okay.
We'll never know the reason the victims decided to flee Monona Police on the evening of January 1st, 2024, because they're no longer breathing to share their story and their side of what happened. And we still don't know the reason Monona Police were attempting to pull them over in the first place. But the victim's choice to flee does not cancel out Monona Police's responsibility to protect them. Monona Police should have terminated the pursuit when speeds became too dangerous for the roads they were driving on. The Monona Police Department is reckless and willfully ignorant of the deadly consequences of their high-speed pursuits. Their desperation for apprehension overrides their pledge to public safety, making the Monona Police Department's current pursuit policy and their over-willingness to engage in pursuits the real threat to the citizens of Monona and Madison. It is absurd to have to reiterate to a group of public safety officials that preventing the loss of life should be their #1 priority. The Monona Police Department needs to adopt a policy that does not allow them to pursue people unless they have probable cause to believe that the people have just committed a violent felony or on their way to commit a violent felony. Sorry. Engaging in a pursuit for vague, suspicious reasons needs to be unacceptable. The Monona Police Department and the Monona Council need to permanently change the pursuit policy immediately to prevent further bloodshed and to keep the people they vowed to protect and serve alive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to make an appearance? Okay, if there are no more, I will declare the appearance section closed. Moving on, there is no public hearing, there is no consent agenda. We have no unfinished business. Under new business, item 2A, consideration of resolution 24-1-2664, purchase approval for fire department radio transceiver put forth by the fire chief, and this is start for immediate approval. Is there a motion to take this out of order?
Motion to take it out of order?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, Chief, I know this was approved in the capital budget for this year, so if you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This was just the resolution to actually order the equipment. It actually came in with installation about $6,000 under budget so far. I will withhold total judgment on that until we actually get the location determined. GenCom is running some tests to figure out the best location to place it. But so far the cost, like I say, is about $6,000 under what we budgeted for it.
Okay. Any questions, Alder Bernstein?
Chief McMullen, I have two questions. One, does this solve our problem in terms of communications towards the northern part of Monona?
100%, yeah.
Okay. Are there other problems in Monona other than this one that we need to be aware of and concerned about?
Generally speaking, any large development creates a radio dead spot. So when you have the bigger condo buildings, Walmart is a good example of that. But some of the bigger buildings create dead spots from the amount of concrete that's in place.
Okay.
And for those, we work with Doug Plowman at the city to put an amplifier within the building itself to correct those issues on site.
So with the Bloom project coming online, is there something in the works for communications there?
We'll be doing a radio check with Bloom as they get the parking garage built to determine whether or not they need to install one or not.
That's just part of your general process, right? With these new
Correct.
buildings?
And the funding for this is not TIF, correct? This project in the north part of Monona? Or is it
It's part of the capital budget.
part of the capital budget? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I guess you need a roll call for this, Aline?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Moore.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Rademacher.
Aye.
Alder Bernstein.
Aye.
Alder DePula.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you.
Thank you.
And let's see, next item 2B, consideration of ordinance 1-24-773, amending chapter 152-1 of the Monona Code of Ordinances regarding ambulance transportation charges for department members. This is put forth by the Public Safety Committee, and this is also starred for immediate approval. Is there a motion to take this out of order?
Motion to take it out of order?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Chief, did you want to talk about this one?
Absolutely. Just a very quick update. This has been in the works for a little while now. Went through Public Safety Committee the end of November. Because of the rules that CMS has for payments, Medicare and Medicaid, this type of ordinance is not admissible for Medicare or Medicaid payments. So basically, we can't charge somebody less than what we charge the federal government for an ambulance transport. So once we determined that and got that worked out with our billing company, the easiest and fastest route is to strike this portion of the ordinance, which has not been used since I've been hired, thankfully. But based on anti-kickback legislation, we're not allowed to charge somebody less than what we charge the federal government for an ambulance transport.
Any questions for the chief? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Moving on to item C, discussion and possible action on enforcement of Monona Police Department Policy 307 regarding vehicle pursuits. This is something I put forward. Just have a little bit of an introduction here, and then the chief is going to speak. As you know, following the fatal crash 2 weeks ago during a Monona Police Department pursuit, Chief Cheney and I decided to temporarily focus any pursuits on subjects officers believed to be involved in dangerous and violent felony offenses. The primary responsibility of the Monona PD is to ensure that Monona is a safe place to live and work. Every day they go to work and put their lives on the line for us. Our officers have worked hard to discourage dangerous driving behavior and to encourage individuals to stop if pulled over in the hope of preventing an event like this. We want voluntary compliance. No one wants to see loss of life. This was a tragedy for all involved. I felt then and now that making the temporary change was the responsible thing to do. It has allowed the police department some time to process what has occurred and given members of the Monona community an opportunity to weigh in on what is best for Monona. In the past 2 weeks, we've all heard from many Monona residents, whether it be through official channels, sharing their thoughts via social media, in groups, or one-on-one conversations. We wanted to give the council an opportunity to discuss the situation. Chief Cheney is going to update us as much as he can, given the ongoing investigation, and following that, members of the City Council will be asked to share their thoughts and propose any actions they think best. Alders are free to propose that we continue the pause, remove it, or whatever else they would like to do, including sending it back to the Public Safety Committee for review. If you do choose to do that, though, I ask that you specify what parts of the policy you'd like them to review so they know what we're expecting of them. So, Chief Cheney, would you like to give us your update?
Yes. Good evening. It's very important that I hear comments and accept feedback. And in the past 2 weeks, certainly I've been out about making contact with lots of folks, returning a lot of phone calls, and that doesn't include just Monona residents. Folks, frankly, from likely all over the state who've gotten wind about this incident. So again, you know, as I have continued to do so, express sadness for the loss of life and the driver's actions that led to the tragic loss of life. I will also emphasize, as much as I can in my role, the support for the families who are grieving. And I mean that, and I've said before this very point, I mean that the most sincerely. You know, we risk our lives to save lives in this profession, and we have very challenging and difficult decisions to make on the road, and there's no guarantee that as we put on this uniform, when your officers go out there, there's no guarantee that they're going to come back. Our officers, as I've mentioned in press releases, and I've spoken to you all as you know this, are very committed to this community because they're invested in this community. Our officers' kids go to school in this area, in Dane County, and in the commuting community of Dane County. Our officers live, officers eat, dine. We're members of this community. And so when I say we're invested, not only professionally, but obviously personally invested. Vehicle pursuits is one of the most difficult things that officers do in the course of their duties. It's one of the most very challenging decisions that we make. And so we talk about it often here at the Monona Police Department, and we have even prior before the change of policy in 2022. And the reason being is because we have to weigh, and it's important to discuss the weight of pursuing an individual and that of the needs of this community and that of the needs to do our job to enforce the law. I came to you, if you recall, for those of you who are on the council and those who may be listening in, based on community concerns that the police department was not acting. And what I mean by that is that there were a couple of instances in which we received some residential home burglaries, one of which was an occupied home burglary. And I sat after that officer took that report, I responded the next day and sat in that individual's living room in their home that was just burglarized while they were in it, and sat with that individual and tried to explain the best I could why after that happened, after this victim experienced that burglary, after the individual was rifling through her personal home while she was there, after they took her car, and after our officer spotted that vehicle, why we couldn't engage, right? That was a challenging discussion, and I respect this body, and I respect the decisions that have been made. I respect any decision that comes tonight. You have one loyal chief, and so I want to commit that to you. But I'm also loyal, obviously, to our residents and our business owners and folks who depend on high-quality police service. I believe that the decision that this body made to adopt a more current policy makes sense for Monona. It makes sense for the uniqueness that is wonderful Monona, surrounded by the second largest city in the state that comes with its share of joys and privileges and thrills, but also its share of challenges. And we experience those challenges regularly, geographically, being surrounded by the city of Madison. Now, I want to say that it's important that I emphasize the point that I work for you, I work for the residents in Monona, but I also am answerable to the fact that we are surrounded by Madison and that we service a larger population. What I will say is that unfortunately I can't give too much more additional information that I've already shared as it relates to the fatal crash on January 1st. But I am appreciative of the work of the Department of Justice. I will remind you, although they are an independent state agency and they can act on their own, I will just remind this body and those listening that I made the request for them to come in to do an independent investigation. I thought that was the best, in the best interest of Monona. You have a very transparent chief, I'd like to think, and you have somebody that values public trust. And part of public trust is bringing in the Department of Justice so that they can conduct their own independent investigation. And as you see, they are doing just that. What comes with that oftentimes is sort of a pace of release of information that some may not understand, and I appreciate that. I am not at the point in this investigation without hindering the Department of Justice where I can release a whole host of information. But I think it was important for DOJ to do, and I respect that they've made the decision to update their incident release to include the thing that I feel is very important with respect to the reason for the attempted traffic stop, and that being reckless driving. And the behavior which was conducted by that driver observed directly by your supervisor, your sergeant who was involved in this incident in a closed parking lot on New Year's Day at 9 o'clock at a school parking lot. And the behavior conducted by that driver was such that I believe this community, I know, based on previous press releases, previous media interviews, and previous conversations, numerous conversations with members of this community, that they expect this police department to address reckless driving behavior. Reckless driving, drunk driving, drug driving, dangerous driving kills every day in this country, and it has taken so many lives from individuals here, not only in Monona, but in Dane County. You hired somebody, and you hired 21 other sworn officers and 5 dispatchers who are deeply passionate and care about saving lives. And so we do what we can with the resources that we have every day in that commitment. What this sergeant did, as I explained in several media interviews and in talking to members of the public, was within policy and was supported and under the law. The sergeant was abiding by law. And I believe that this community expects our officers to address violent and potentially dangerous driving behavior when it is appropriate for them to do so. There are several conditions in the current policy and factors and considerations that officers have to weigh in split seconds. And it's my job to make sure that they're trained, equipped, and have the capability to do that. But it's also my job to review instances in which our policy is not being adhered to. I personally have touched the vast majority of police pursuits since my time here, thanks to the technology that you've afforded your police department with, which is in-car video and body-worn cameras. And I can tell you that I personally have witnessed, frame by frame, to some extent, the video footage from the supervisor's in-car video from this fatal crash. I can tell you with confidence, and again, it's important for me to emphasize that the incident was tragic based on the driver's actions here. And so I don't want to diminish that fact that this is very sad. But what I am telling you is that the officer's actions, the sergeant's actions, in my opinion, and I think that the video, once released eventually by the Department of Justice, will support this, was reasonable. This is not an instance in which you had an officer bumper to bumper. Although I can't really reveal any more additional information than that, I will tell you that, unfortunately and tragically, this operator of this vehicle decided not to stop and decided to likely push the limits of their driving ability and the vehicle. That is not a conclusive statement, as that will be coming out from the Department of Justice. I'm telling you what I observed and the knowledge of this case as I know it. And so more will be revealed by the Department of Justice when they are able to do so, and I am as patient as I ask all of the members of the public to be with their investigation. They are doing the job that I think you all expect them to do, to make sure it's thorough, cross every T, dot every I, and I am giving them any and all access that they need to make sure that they get their job done. And I mentioned before at the last meeting, I believe, that I even gave them a key card access to our police department. I mean, that's how much access that agency, the Department of Justice, has had with this police department. We've received no indication that there wasn't information that they were looking for that they did not get. And we will continue to work hand in hand in support of a full and thorough investigation, independent investigation from the Department of Justice. As it relates to our practice of vehicle pursuits, that this community, through you all, the elected members of Monona, has enacted since November of 2022. I will tell you in 2023 alone, as I provided this data to members of our wonderful media, who I'm appreciative of the fact that they're here today in the spirit of transparency. In 2023 alone, the Monona Police Department engaged in 59 vehicle pursuits. I get a question often when I say that the Monona Police engaged in 59 police pursuits as to how come so many, Chief? I value that question, but let me start by asking a question in return. Why is it that in 59 times people have chosen to flee from your police department? That is just us. Multiply that number, obviously, countywide, based on some of the radio transmissions that I've heard from other municipalities in which vehicles have fled from other police departments. But I'm not answerable to them. I'm answerable to you all in this police department. 59 times has somebody in Monona in 2023 fled from your police officers. Of the 59, to the wonderful young lady's point, it's important for me to mention this. 15 times of the 59, your officers have disengaged, have terminated the pursuit based on a variety of factors: traffic, weather conditions, a reason for the stop, for example, was school letting out, so time of day, etc. There's a variety of factors that officers have to weigh when determining if they need to terminate a pursuit or if they're authorized to continue that pursuit. 15 of the 59 times your officers have terminated that pursuit. I don't want there, and as I've said to many members, dozens of which you've called and I've spoken to in the past 2 weeks, dozens of members, I don't want there to be any impression that this is an agency that can't stop. We do. There's record of the fact that we do, and we will continue to use good discretion out there. I'm going to hold our officers accountable, but what I will tell you is that they are passing the litmus test. They're doing everything that this agency and this community expects them to do with respect to they're just using their discretion and using it reasonably. We're small. We're 21 officers and 5 dispatchers. We have an opportunity to engage in conversation, to talk amongst one another, to sit down and look at video footage, to review other footage, to have heart-to-heart discussions about what it means being a black man in this community and how sometimes that makes people feel. We have courageous discussions in this police department. We have discussions about, is it worth it? We have discussions about the priorities and the level of crime that we're seeing around us, the level of crime we're seeing here in Monona, and being able to do that balancing act of doing our job and doing the job that is expected of us while also doing our best to preserve life. There are very sad and unfortunate things that happen in the course of our job. And we wake up every day, and I can speak for every one of my officers, we wake up every day either praying if you believe it or thinking if you don't, that nobody gets hurt on my shift. No person I interact with, no call I go to, or myself, that everybody comes back in one piece and nobody gets hurt. We have a job where that isn't always practical, but we try our darndest to make the right decisions on the street based on the resources that you all provide us. We have highly capable and competent and caring and compassionate individuals who do this job to ensure that that is the case every day. And so as much as we speak about tragedies such as this, I think it's only important to also understand some of the risks of our job and that we don't take those risks lightly. Going back to some of the data and the 59 vehicle pursuits and the 15 of those in which are terminated, please know that that figure does not include the number of times where individuals have fled from your police officers and they did not pursue. So again, you have 59 pursuits, 15 are which the officers have terminated. That does not include the times in which officers have decided not to pursue at all. That number, I'm sure, although we haven't been able to tabulate that because we haven't collected that data. My former agency at the time I was there didn't collect that data. Is rather unfortunate. I think all of this, and the fact that I struggle because I've been working my tail off to communicate a message of please stop, to share with people and try my best to convince them, sometimes with these silly but wonderful Stetson hats that we wear, which is a fabulous tool to engage and interact with people, by the way, as we've mentioned here before. But I've tried my darndest to communicate that we are a compassionate and caring group of officers. We will treat you on a case-by-case basis, and we have a great deal of discretion when it comes to the outcome. Okay? There's some things we cannot overcome, as I mentioned before, like a warrant, for example, that is a compelling order for law enforcement officers, or domestic violence, or some of these other mandatory arrest situations. But if you stop, this has been my message, if you stop and you encounter a Monona police officer, I have the body-worn camera footage to prove it. You will be met with a compassionate and caring cop who's going to take your circumstance into account. We don't have to take you to jail most of the time. We don't have to arrest you a lot of the time. But I need you, and we urge you, to stop. Please go back and look at the many times in which I talk to these fabulous members of the media who see me way too often, with my press releases, listen to WVMO on the radio waves. And I'm not trying to be braggadocious about it. This is all sad. So this is not me trying to sort of talk about everything I've done. But there is a record of me out there urging people to stop. We risk our lives to save lives. And it's important for people to try their best to understand that we're trying to do our job out there, and we simply need people to stop when they're pulled over by police. Now, of the 59 that I spoke of in 2023, I'm just going to read through some of the scenarios here and the circumstances in which officers engaged individuals, right? A lot of it is traffic violations as it relates to dangerous driving behavior. We're not talking about Joe or Jane or me, Brian, forgot to turn on his blinker, which is a pet peeve of mine, so I always turn on my blinker. But we're not talking about the failure to signal turn violations. We're talking dangerous driving behavior that can kill somebody is what your officers are out there engaging folks and trying to do a traffic stop on. And so when you have traffic violations to that level of dangerous driving behavior, I think that I'd like to believe, based on my hundreds of conversations with folks since you've appointed me chief here, is a behavior in which this community expects their police department to address. Some of the other violations of the 59 that I'm referring to include stolen automobiles. Again, if you think about those circumstances of this Monona resident I was just speaking of when I started, I promise this isn't a dissertation, but when I started talking to this group, is that burglary victim who's in her home and her car gets stolen. Stolen auto violations. That's something that we've been addressing. Assisting outside agencies. So of that 59, that includes several instances in which your police department has helped the Dane County Sheriff, the Madison Police, Wisconsin State Patrol, other partner agencies that have asked for our help, or that we've tried to intercept by deploying spikes, or because there was a lone deputy or lone trooper. We believe that that individual needed help, and it fit within our policy, and our officers assisted. That is part of the 59 that I'm referring to, okay? We already talked about dangerous driving. Reckless driving is something we see. I've got that underscored in bold in my sheet here. Illegal drug activity and drug behavior. You know, people are dying daily in this county and in this country, for sure, from overdoses, from the toxic, plaguing drugs that are in this community. Your officers are working and doing their best to address that. We have a lot of open air parking lots in which there's a lot of illegal transaction and drug behavior, believe it or not, in Monona, that are happening. And your officers are working to address that because, again, they're trying to save lives. I have here a shooting in Madison. What happens across the street is of interest to this community. Oftentimes, because of our location, geographical location with the stretch of the Beltline, Highway 51 and Broadway, we are oftentimes a place to get from A to B quickly. And when we believe that that danger or that threat or that suspect involved in that shooting is likely to drive our way, we are going to do our best to keep this community safe. Armed robbery, Madison.
Excuse me, ladies, if you'd like to talk, would you mind going out in the hall? Thank you.
Domestic violence situations, dangerous domestic violence situations where who knows if it were not for the officer intervening, the officer making an attempt to stop that violent domestic violence suspect, who knows what would happen if we did not make that attempt. The list goes on and on. Now let me talk to you about some of the charging decisions and issuances, charging decisions by the district attorney's office and sometimes the United States Attorney's office for some of these pursuit violations. And that doesn't include the very serious violation of attempting to elude a police officer. That is a felony, and it's very serious because it endangers lives, right? There's a reason why that's classified as a felony. But some of the other violations, and then this is just 2023, of the 59 vehicle pursuits, here's a sampling of some of the charging. Second degree recklessly endangering safety, possession of cocaine, attempted to elude police as a repeater, meaning that they've already been charged with that, convicted. Possession of a firearm by a felon, possession of methamphetamines, possession of other narcotics, possession of cocaine with intent to deliver, felony bail jumping, operating while revoked, possession of a firearm by a felon, felony bail, possession with intent of psilocybin, possession of narcotic drugs, second degree recklessly endangering, felony bail ×3, possession of a firearm by a felon, gun charge that was handled by Fitchburg PD, but we engaged in that pursuit. But it was a Fitchburg PD case. Second degree recklessly endangering, resisting arrest that Monona police took, but there were additional violations from the city of Madison from prior incidences. Second degree recklessly endangering again, possession of firearm by an adjudicated delinquent, meaning that individual is now an adult, but was adjudicated a delinquent and so is prohibited from possessing a firearm. Carrying a concealed weapon. Second degree recklessly endangering, possession of narcotic drug as a repeater, possession with intent to deliver cocaine as a repeater, possession of a narcotic drug, possession with intent to deliver cocaine as a repeater. I'm just giving you a sort of a highlighted sampling because I didn't want to consume too much time. I've already, I think, consumed enough of some of the very serious and significant cases in which these 59 felony violations have resulted in. These are DA chargings, okay? These are not what we arrested them for. These are DA charging decisions. We have a problem here in Dane County, people. And I mean that with all due respect, wonderful council members, my people, okay? We have a problem here in Dane County with people fleeing from the police. And I would work every day, regardless of the decisions here, to continue to urge people to stop. And I will continue to work with our partner agencies, state, local, and federal, to help spread that messaging, but also have their back. Because we're a team here. We can't be so siloed and isolated here in Monona. Although we answer to you, I think you want us to work as a team, and you want us to work with other agencies to try to keep this community, and generally Dane County, safe. Most of us travel outside of city limits to do something, right? It's important for us to care about what's happening around us as well. And so I serve at your pleasure. All of us do. And we do your bidding. Just know that you have a very trained, capable, and equipped police department. There are people who care that do this job. I care doing this job every day. Folks put in long hours to make sure they get it right. And you have a motivated crew that understands the gravity of what happened on January 1st and has allowed some time for self-reflection and discussion internally. And that's important. We did that after the fatal fire that occurred. We do that after any significant event. But we're still out there doing our job. And that's one of the messages that I tried to relay to our wonderful partners in the media when I did interviews on a couple Fridays ago. We're out there doing our job still because you expect us to do that. And I want to reassure my commitment to you that your officers will continue to do their job, continue to risk their lives to save lives, and we welcome any feedback that you may want to give us through policy direction or otherwise. But let me just talk about feedback, and then I'm done, Mayor. Okay, thank you. You know, this was sort of a period of what should I do? And there were a lot of questions from members of the public. And as I mentioned before, I took several dozen phone calls. It's hard to put a number of how many phone calls I've placed or how many interactions I've had, personal interactions, going to the quick trip and being stopped and having discussions about pursuit policies, et cetera. Letters that I've received, letters the police department has received, emails that the police department has received. And I will tell you that based on everything that I've seen, this community, residents of Monona, have voiced their understanding of the gravity of this event and appreciative of the fact that, you know, we're taking this seriously and that we care about what the community thinks. But they're urging us to continue to do our job. Do it safely, do it smartly, but keep this community safe. And that's been the synopsis of the feedback that we've received at the police department. So that's not to speak to what City Hall or yourselves. That's just me and the police department and our officers and dispatchers. That's it. Here for questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the chief? Alder DePula.
Quick question for you. Under the old policy, let's go back in time a little bit. Just hypothetical. If me, were to go and, I don't know, walk into a bank and give them a note and ask to put some money in a bag, and then were to leave and take off, and were to take off at high speed, under the old policy, would you have chased me?
Was there a threat of a weapon or
Nope.
there was no violence whatsoever?
Nope.
No. We would not have been authorized to chase you.
So I could get away with it if I could, and especially if I had stolen plates on my car and you couldn't identify me and I got away with it, then there would be no consequences.
Stolen plates or lack of putting a plate on your car is a common tactic that anybody engaged in examples like you just did, a bank robbery or any other offense. It's a common tactic that they use. So the answer to your question, Alder Pula, is no. The Monona Police Department, under the previous policy, would not have been able to engage in a vehicle pursuit under those circumstances that you described. And yes, that day, likely, the individual might have gotten away.
So without consequences, where's the deterrent to that sort of behavior? If you can get away with it.
I think that's, I mean, I don't know if that was rhetorical or not.
Yeah.
It was? Okay, I don't need to answer.
No, you don't need to answer it. No, it's just.
I have an answer.
It's, you know, as a member of the council and a member of the community, it's a difficult question to tackle, but are we to just give up and not assign any sort of culpability to those that willfully engage in reckless and lawless behavior? I guess I'm just making a statement. I'm not asking you a question. But I guess I just don't see how we are to deter people from poor behavior in communities without consequences. Thank you.
Alder Wood.
Thanks. I do have a question for you eventually, but I wanted to say something first. I think given the magnitude of the outcome of this pursuit, I think was entirely responsible and necessary for us to review it as we are tonight and discuss it. I think when you have this kind of sudden loss of life, especially of young people, the consequences of those losses are going to echo through families and friends for years, decades. So it's, I mean, absolutely horrific. Not that it matters much, but, you know, for my 25 years of being on the city council, it was probably the worst thing that we've gone through as a city. I think before we understood the risks of pursuit policy in a theoretical way, and obviously when 3 people don't go home at night, it's not theoretical anymore. So I just want to make it clear that we understand the magnitude of what happened. I will say, you know, we did try a very restrictive pursuit policy for about a year and a half, and I think the chief has adequately described some of the consequences, negative consequences of that. And I think, as Patrick sort of made the point, just allowing people to just drive away when the police want to try to pull them over and essentially make police stops optional is simply not a sustainable policy. That in and of itself creates public safety risks. I would note one thing. I was out of the spreadsheet that you didn't mention, I noticed in 2023 there were 12 guns that were recovered as a result of the 59 pursuits of the 44 that actually ended up not being terminated. So I don't think is a feasible policy to just tell people you don't really have to stop for the police if you don't want to. And it's, you know, we do obviously rely on not just our policies, but our officers to implement those policies in a responsible manner, professional manner, and provide the training for them that they need to do that. But at the end of the day, I think this pursuit policy serves the community's interest much better than the sort of laissez-faire approach that we had previously. Thanks. My question, if you could just confirm it, was that there were 12 in 2023, 12 guns recovered was my count.
I get carried away with some of my passion, so I forgot that stat, and so I appreciate you pointing that out because, and certainly in every press release or media interview, I've mentioned the guns that we are seizing.
Yeah.
And I sort of kid ourselves, and I have to caution myself because words matter, but when I say little old Monona with 21 officers and 5, that just means to say that's just us. That's just our agency taking this many guns off the streets, imagining what's happening around us. And in my conversations with fellow law enforcement officers and chiefs of police, we're seizing a lot of guns, and guns in the hands of people that want to do harm is a very dangerous and deadly thing, as we know. But the equipment on these guns to make them fully automatic weapons, I just met with ATF last week, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, just last week, because of cases that we are seeing here in Monona, and cases that are happening in Dane County with these violent weapons. So Alder Wood, thank you for pointing that out. 12 guns seized of the 44 pursuits that did not result in termination. So 44 arrests, 12 guns seized. And that's just in 2023. I didn't necessarily go back. But you all heard the story about the AK-47 that was within arm's reach of one of your officers during a traffic stop in a pursuit. I mean, you're talking about some war-ready weapons. And I'm not a fear person. I don't like that. It pains me sometimes to talk about these things. It's sort of but it's the reality in which your officers live, and it's the world in which you live in. So it's important for you all to hear about these stories of these guns being seized and these weapons, very dangerous weapons, in the hands of wrong people that are out there. Thank you.
Chief, real quick, all of those weapons that were seized, I would guess that all of them were stolen, correct?
Not all.
Not all?
But the vast majority of them indeed were stolen, and/or we can trace them back to shootings that occurred in our surrounding area.
Okay.
And mind you, we're actively engaged in an investigation of an attempted homicide that happened in our community. So I try to remind folks that. There was a 17-year-old that was shot in this community. And we're still looking for those suspects. We've got some good work ahead of us, and we've done some good work, but this isn't so far from us and so far removed. We're dealing with this here and now.
Mayor Aldermore has her hand raised.
Yeah, Aldermore?
Which one? I gotta look at.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first I want to say, how tragic this occurrence was, and how sorry I am for the families involved. I also want to extend my gratitude to the police chief and our police department for immediately turning it over to the Department of Justice for investigation. Obviously, I think it was a smart thing, to at least take a pause on our current policy. Having been on the council when the policy was changed, I certainly am well aware of the number of instances, whether it was somebody rolling down, the belt line at over 100 miles an hour, truly reckless driving, or somebody badly under the influence in reckless driving, or somebody having committed violent crime, or as the chief said, somebody where, one of our adjoining agencies, whether it was the Dane County Sheriff's Office or Madison, has requested our assistance. So I understand all that. And I truly believe that our officers are well-trained and are capable of high-speed pursuits and capable of knowing when to call that pursuit off, given their training. All that said, what's concerning to me is the genesis of that chase. Not really the chase itself, as much as the genesis of the chase, and whether or not we're we're using not only sound judgment but equitable judgment when it comes to whether a person we've attempted to stop should be chased. And I say that because...
Aldermore, can I just ask you, are you speaking about the particular chase that on January 1st, or just chases in general?
Chases in general.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, chases in general. So, so that's a concern, a large concern for me. And I say that because, Chief, I think, among the many things that you referenced in terms of the chases, the reason for the chases and the charges that resulted included things like possession of cocaine or possession of psilocybin or other things that wouldn't in and of themselves be, it seems to me, wouldn't necessarily be a reason for a chase. And I'm reminded of several years ago, prior to your arrival to Monona, when we were debating about whether or not to, for all intents and purposes, decriminalize personal use of marijuana. And our chief at the time gave us the data around the number of arrests that were involved for marijuana, and there was a pretty significant discussion around the number of arrests. And one of the things that came out of that discussion was that the arrest for marijuana, a very large percentage of the time, was secondary. In other words, our police department was going because there was a fight at a bar or something else had occurred, and then when they went because of that fight or some other thing that occurred and frisked the individual or inspected the car, they found the marijuana, so the marijuana became the charge, even though the marijuana wasn't the initial reason for obviously for the police being called to begin with. So it's concerning to me, as it was many years ago, the genesis of, under any circumstance, the genesis of the stop to begin with and whether it was significant enough to warrant a chase. I'm less concerned about the value of the chase and our officers' ability to undertake the chase given their training. So that's a primary concern for me. I don't really have a question, although Chief, you're welcome to respond to that, but that's genesis is most concerning for me.
Thank you, Alder. If I may,
Sure.
I probably didn't present this well enough. And when I was listing off those list of violations of the charges, those aren't standalone. So that's not to say that when I read off, for example, possession with intent to deliver cocaine, that was the only consequence or charge of that incident. For example, one of them might have been reckless driving, which led to an eluding case, which led to the discovery of a possession with intent of cocaine, right? So as I was listing them off, it was not by sort of independently each of the 59 violations or the 44, in theory, violations line by line. I was just sort of going through the list of the various charges, and I didn't read them all, in summary, if that makes sense. I have been, I've spoken to Senator Agard. I'm one of the few chiefs in the state that is for the legalization of marijuana. I have family members who, I don't know, Mayor, I'm not going to go there too far, but I have family members who live in a state where it's legal, who it's changed their lives and are living better quality of life. Our dog, Jocko, who you've seen a few times and you've heard from a few times, is specifically, my decision is not trained to detect the odor of marijuana, right? I am addressing these sort of, I don't know, lack of a better term, hardcore, I guess, drugs in our society that are killing people. And when I talk about things like psilocybin, mushrooms, I'm not talking about the store-bought brand. I'm talking about the things that are laced with toxic substances that can kill kids and have. And so those are the things that, and I just wanted to make that clear, Alder Moore, because you raised a good point, and I appreciate and respect that point, that I probably didn't do a better job when I was listing these things. Those aren't sort of standalone charges. They also were accompanying charges with other offenses.
I appreciate that. Just as a follow-up to that, Chief, you know, as it relates to, again, the genesis of it, you know, I can very definitely recall the previous mayor, Bob Miller. I think it was pretty much a 3-3 split, and he said if there was one, having looked at the data, if there was, you know, if there was one even possibility that our police department was not, even if you know, were in support of arresting people for marijuana, that if there was, you know, one possibility of our police department not acting equitably when it came to, you know, charges for possession of marijuana, he didn't want anything to do with it, and he broke the tie to decriminalize marijuana as a result of it. And so I guess that's, again, that's what I'm just getting at here is I'm more concerned about the genesis and how the department is defining reckless driving or reckless behavior before they decide to take on a pursuit. And whether that definition is applied equally.
Alder DePuy?
My apologies, Mayor, for not mentioning it before, but I did want to mention that out of dozens of people that have reached out over the course of the last few weeks, Monona residents are overwhelmingly in support of our pursuit policy. And that's directly heard from citizens of Monona, not from folks outside of Monona.
Thank you. Just getting back to Alder Moore's comments for a minute. Chief, you've explained to me, I know when we were talking about this a few weeks ago, what is your process when there's been a pursuit after it's done? You do a review of it, correct? And do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for that question. It's important for the public to understand sort of our process, but there's a review that's conducted in which the video, in-car video is pulled. The body-worn camera is pulled. What we do when we look at the video, I personally look at the video. We have a subject matter expert who's trained, certified instructor in emergency vehicle operations, AKA pursuit driving and emergency vehicle driving. You have an officer who's certified as an instructor in-house that looks and reviews as well and gives me any feedback. I'm looking to make sure that the stop was valid, that it was within policy, that the officer used good judgment, that if when choosing to engage in the pursuit, the officer used good judgment and followed policy, that any driving was appropriate, that the officer used due regard, that the officer was driving within their means. For example, if you have a brand new officer like myself, when I started at the young age of 22 and thinking that I was invincible as most 22-year-olds may think, well, at least I did at the time, I thought that I can drive a car faster and harder than the rest of them, right? I learned very quickly that that was not the case in my Crown Victoria that I was issued to drive every day, and that I needed to slow down because I was exceeding my capabilities, although be it professionally trained, I was exceeding my abilities as a young and relatively inexperienced police officer and driver. That same principle exists today, where I look at the experience of the driver, the car as a factor. You know, you all equip us with some very powerful cars. Police cars now have upwards of 400 horsepower. They're very powerful, but that is sort of 0 to 60. It is not a Bugatti that can, you know, take a very, you know, expensive sports car that can take turns really well. Porsche, how's that? That can take turns very well. And so we have to keep that in mind about the understanding and capabilities of the equipment that we operate. I certainly take into account the officers, sort of how they're communicating. Are they in control? Did they give out information on the radio? Are they thinking ahead? Are they calling out traffic conditions? Are they calling out a location? Are they thinking about requesting outside agency assistance, for example, to help deploy tire deflation devices? Are they aware that they're driving towards downtown Madison and should consider potentially pursuing if the conditions change from Monona to Madison, right? In which obviously they do. Any day of the week, those conditions are going to change based on where you drive. And so that evaluation of the driving behavior, the decision to pursue, the driving behavior, was the officer in control? What was the suspect doing potentially at that time to potentially prompt the officer to terminate the pursuit? For example, did they decide to drive the wrong way on Highway 12, right? That is a decision, case by case, mind you, case by case. Here's a hypothetical I will tell you, because some people have asked, well, when is it ever okay to pursue an individual? If we have a circumstance in which that armed, or your case was unarmed, but if we have an armed bank robber who we know has just taken the life of somebody with intent, right? Committed a bank robbery and is on the phone saying he's on his way or she's on their way to go take another life. We have a duty and an obligation to continue under that circumstance. Based on the conditions, we still have to evaluate, and our policy says we do. But I would argue we have a duty to try to do our best to engage that individual. Now, that might mean backing off and radioing ahead, right? And seeing if another agency can engage. But all those factors, Mayor and council members, are what I look at and we look at in-house when we review our pursuits. But I also look at how the officer acts and behaves once the vehicle has stopped. That is one of the most, the pursuit itself is dangerous, but once the vehicle is stopped is also extremely dangerous. If you recall the incident in which our wonderful canine officer was injured and Canine Jocko did an apprehension, were it not for that dog, folks, we might have had an officer-involved shooting, because that suspect had the gun in his freaking hand when the officers chased him down and the dog chased him down. The gun was in the suspect's hand, okay? So I'm looking at, number one, did the officer act appropriately and within policy and under training with respect to their interaction with the dangers at hand and trying to apprehend the suspect, but also how they're treating them after arrest. Are they respectful? Are they assessing for injuries? Are they engaging in respectful conversation? Are they de-escalating, for example? I will tell you that you have a great crew. I feel comfortable bragging about the officers and how they interact with people. Not only their decision-making to engage in a pursuit, but also how they treat folks after their pursuit. It is hard to go from this state of stress under a high-speed pursuit to bringing it down within seconds and minutes of ending that pursuit. But they do it. They do it because we talk about it, we give feedback, saying, hey, maybe, let's not use the F-bomb today, that sort of thing under stress. But they're not, I don't want people to think that, we can't turn it off. That's the same point of me saying the 15 pursuits of the 59, the 15 cases of the 59 pursuits in which your officers have terminated. They're making good judgments out there. And so the internal review and evaluation is conducted not only by me, but we also have our subject matter expert who provides feedback, and we also internally share that. So if one officer could learn from a driving behavior or maybe making a different decision, the whole department can. And so we talk about that and we utilize our briefing time with our supervisor's support to sort of navigate those conversations.
And this is with every pursuit.
Every single pursuit.
Right.
Every single pursuit.
Okay, thank you. Alder Rademacher and then Alder Bernstein?
Yeah. I also want to just echo what others have already said, was that just this is an absolute horrific tragedy, and all of us recognize it as such. I know that information is limited. It's my understanding that of the 3 people in the car, 2 were 30 years old, 1 was 19 years old. My daughter will turn 19 tomorrow, January 17th. And I remember it being just about as cold back then as it is right now. So I get it. And it's so terribly unimaginable pain. We are, the chief likes to use the word compassionate. And I hear you using it often. And I would agree with you that you are a compassionate bunch. We all are. We all recognize this as a tragedy. Moving on to just a more, a little bit of history. Public safety was a committee that I was assigned to at one point. And when I was a part of that committee, the chief was committed to reviewing all of the policies. The chief was new to Monona, and as he was familiarizing himself with the policies here, correct me if I'm wrong, it just in summary, you were seeing a lot of things that were sort of homegrown, Monona-specific, iteratively, sort of written over the years, and it was your belief that what we should really do is bring our policies in alignment with what was already being known as best practices, state standard, best practices, the stuff that our neighboring communities had already adopted, and we should too. And so for a long stretch of time, each week or each time we would meet, the chief would have a new policy to bring to our attention. And we would review it and understand it, and at some point there were tiny modifications, but for the most part the priority was standardization, best practices, tried and true policies. This was no exception. And so it's inaccurate to believe that Monona is acting in a way that is inconsistent. On a different note, or if there's anything you'd like to add, go ahead. Okay.
Thanks, right.
On a different note, as Patrick also said, there has been a lot of feedback from citizens, and I thought I would just say that some may feel that it was the wrong thing for this current policy to be put on pause. Some may say, that's an admission of guilt when you do something like that. A citizen that reached out to me used that phrase. I would disagree with both of those statements. Just think of your daily life. You try something new, whether it's at your office, your home. You try something new, you give it a shot, you see how it works, you evaluate it, and if something goes wrong, you slow down. You step back and you rethink. You pause, you reflect. You ask yourself, you're introspective, you ask yourself if you're on the right path. And by pausing, that's what we are doing. That's what we've done. And I support that, and I think the mayor made the right decision. Clarifying this, the mayor did not make that decision by herself, and there are some who might think that this was some sort of a unilateral decision made in haste by one person. That is not true whatsoever. And I would just like to put that misunderstanding to rest. Let's see. Got kind of scribbly all over the place here. And then, Chief, to your, to the point about drugs that you were listing off, and I realize we've sort of like clarified that whole situation, but just to be crystal clear, you're not initiating a pursuit because someone has drugs. You're initiating a pursuit because someone is swerving at high speeds, endangering other lives. And that must stop. That's very dangerous and violent behavior. Could kill. It could kill people. After the stop is made, that's when you're discovering that there are drugs. Is that more or less an accurate situation?
For the vast majority of cases, that is
Right.
entirely
Yeah,
accurate.
okay,
That's not
yes.
to say that this agency hasn't engaged in, with, in cooperation with the
Sure,
DEA
sure.
and the task force.
Sure.
Special initiatives that
Right.
are targeting specifically drug dealers.
Yes.
In our community that are selling dangerous drugs.
Yes, and then you see the car, you see the plates, that's the person, you go after them. I get that, okay.
But yes.
Yeah.
I mean, egregious traffic violation, dangerous traffic violation, reckless driving, which is a part of the dangerous driving behavior, that has been consistent. And I don't think that, Alder Rademacher, if I may, and I've talked to you, I've obviously talked to many on the council, but there's really not a day that goes by I don't hear about dangerous driving in this town.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you all hear it too.
Yeah.
It's hard for me not to make a traffic stop just going home every day because of somebody running a red light, swerving because they're, under the influence, or distracted driving, which kills too, by the way, or something on the belt line. The belt line is just, it's a challenge, and we're working to address that challenge.
Thank you.
Alder Bernstein.
Chief, thank you so much for coming before us and giving us all that information. I think it was really good that you put all those statistics together and shared that with us. I do have a couple questions, though. One, I've heard the reason for the pursuit was either quote-unquote suspicious activity or quote-unquote reckless driving. That's what I've seen in the media. But can you add anything to that, or why there were two different descriptions?
I have to be very delicate here. What I'll tell you is that I did not use that language. That was the Department of Justice who used the language of the suspicious vehicle.
Okay.
I will tell you that that is a factor, and I'll give you an example, and I've shared with others. And I'm not necessarily saying that what I'm going to explain to you is exactly what happened in this case, because I'm not quite at the point where I believe the Department of Justice wants me to give those details.
Yeah, I understand.
But if I may, I'll give you sort of a close hypothetical. Your officers are trained to detect impaired driving. Part of that impaired driving may include lane deviation or swerving between the lanes, right? Some of that impaired driving might include a sudden and abrupt lane change, sort of out of nowhere, right? What I would describe as a dangerous lane change, but a lane change violation nevertheless. Some may be impeding traffic because they're driving, 10 miles an hour in a 35 mile per hour zone, and traffic is sort of having to navigate around it. Some driving behavior might be indicative that something more is going on. That is so also the case, as it doesn't relate to drunk driving or impaired driving, of instances in which people are casing, which they're surveilling or they're trying to determine if they're going to rob the liquor store, right? Officers are trained to detect impaired driving and or suspicious behavior. Now, that may not necessarily lead to a reason for a stop, although some can articulate. We do have Terry v. Ohio, and you can make a traffic stop under certain circumstances. But officers are trained to be proactive and address drunk driving and patrol the city. And there might be some things that say, that was odd. Let me take a closer look at that. Not to say I'm going to stop them, But let me take a closer look at that driving behavior that drew my attention to that vehicle. At night with tinted windows. Okay? So, and that's, I'm not saying that that's a reason, but I'm saying we don't know who the occupants are. Okay? And so in exploring more and moving further in determining what do I have here, one of the first things we do is run a plate. Well, you got to be able to get the plate before you run it. And to see who it is you're dealing with. Is the plate stolen? Is the plate belong in the car? You're still exploring what's going on here. And in the course of exploring what's going on here, the vehicle drives in a manner in which is reckless because it almost ran you off the road, for example, or you needed to take evasive maneuver to avoid being struck yourself as a police officer. Who's to say that might not happen to somebody else that could result in death, right? Or can get injured because it's either an impaired driver or it's somebody who's not in the right state of mind, or it's somebody who just committed a violent offense, or you don't know. But what I know is that you almost hit me and you behaved and drove in a dangerous, very dangerous manner that I need to at least try to make a traffic stop. And when the conditions are such where you have little to no traffic, and what I mean by little to no traffic, say one vehicle outside of the suspect vehicle that you've spotted in the course of pursuing, and the conditions are such, and your discipline is such, and your experience is there, your vehicle, you know, you've checked the lug nuts on the tires, you know its capabilities, and the conditions are such that you engage in a pursuit, and you've radioed it out, and you're following policy. I think that potentially, that hypothetical I'm giving you is a right judgment call.
Okay. Well, that leads me to my second question, and I know DCI, Department of Justice, is doing an investigation, and we're all kind of waiting to see what that looks like. Is there any schedule or prediction on when that might become available to us here on the council?
I will answer that question twofold. First, that prompts me to talk about our internal investigation. So right away, day one, we started an internal investigation to see if the officer was abiding by policy and was obeying the law as required under policy. And I've conducted that. My internal investigation is complete. And that is without DOJ's specific findings, because I have the video that they have. I have the squad video and the body cam video that they have, and I've been privy to that, frame by frame, as I've mentioned. I have the officer's statements that match what I saw in the video. And when looking at policy and law and practice within our police department and what is expected, et cetera, the officer was acting reasonably, and as I've mentioned before, was doing the work that I think this community expects from your officers. Mm-hmm. DOJ, I'm not in control of, Alder, and I know you appreciate that, as you reference. I'm trying to do this delicate balance. Remember, it is us who asked them to do this investigation. And so I don't want to apply any undue pressure on them conducting a complete and thorough investigation. They're DOJ, not that they would cave anyway, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm giving them any pressure to hurry up this investigation.
Okay.
As such, I have not asked for a timetable. I do not know what their schedule is. I do not know when they're going to release that. It can take weeks, months. I'm not entirely certain.
Okay. Well, to my mind, if we were to refer this to public safety or take a harder look at our policy in terms of pursuit, it should probably follow once we've had that investigation. So I wouldn't recommend that we do anything at this point until we get that kind of review and we can look at the results of their investigation. So I just share that with the council and with you.
Thank you, Alder.
Does anyone else have any comments? Alder Holmquist?
I'll only add, and it's been talked about quite a bit, so I'll only add that I echo the same. All of the feedback that I've received has been overwhelmingly in support of our current policy, not the pause policy, but our current pursuit policy. It's been overwhelming support, and I would encourage this body to lift the pause on our pursuit policy.
Is there anyone else who'd like to make a comment? Alder Wood?
I guess a question based on what Alder Holmquist just said. My understanding is that that the full effect of the policy either is or is going to be reinstituted, and that this body, if we object to that, could take action. Otherwise, if we don't take any action, it's going to go back into force.
I do
For one
plan.
thing, well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, just to answer that question, and I didn't read this tonight, I've thought about it, but then I thought I'd give you know, all a chance to weigh in. But I think unless you propose something else, you know, in coming days, given what I've heard from the community, because I've heard the same thing. I've had 2 people tell me they'd like us to stop our pursuit policy, and a lot of other people reach out, both people I know and didn't know, people who sent me emails, who have called me, telling me that they would like us to continue with the pursuit policy. So I think given that and what everyone else has heard, unless you propose something different, then I am prepared to discuss an appropriate time to lift the pause with the chief sometime in coming days. So.
If I could just
Sure.
add to that, I mean, right now, that is the adopted policy of this body, so
Yep.
I think at some point, unless we change it, it needs to go back into effect.
Well, personally, I think that would be unwise. Until we have the investigation in hand, until we know the facts of what happened here, I would not be comfortable with re-engaging with the old policy. I think it's way too soon to do that. Personally, I
I
just
think
don't agree with that at all.
Alder Moore and then Alder Rademacher.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for the chief, which is kind of an extension of the discussion that we've had so far, which is that one of the things that has come out as a result of this incident, this tragic incident, is the sense, and maybe this is just social media hyperbole, and that's why I'm asking the question, but there seems to be some impression within the public domain that our policy is considerably more lenient, I guess, or maybe lenient is not the right word, just more, more judgment-oriented, more than any other police force. That, in a sense, there are some people that have even said, that the Monona police are reckless in our behavior in pursuing criminals. Obviously, but so I guess I want you, Chief, if you could speak to how, like, for instance, I've seen a lot on social media, people saying Madison police aren't allowed to pursue at all, and that even the Dane Sheriff's Office isn't allowed to pursue. Can you speak to that? How our policy differs from other surrounding communities? If it does.
Yep, thank you, Alder. I'm going to be very cautious in that I don't want to speak on other agency policies too in-depthly.
Okay.
But I'll try my best to answer your question if that's fair, just because I don't want to misspeak, right? I no longer work for Madison, so I don't know sort of the ins and outs of the discussions that are happening there. I've never worked for the sheriff's office. What I'll tell you is that we've assisted the sheriff's office in several pursuits. I don't know verbatim their pursuit policy. It is not that, for example, of Madison's pursuit policy, which I would articulate or describe as fairly restrictive. My concern here is that, you know, we're tasked, again, with trying to address the dangerous driving behavior. And when you have standalone dangerous driving behavior, which could be deadly, and I was involved in responding to, not participating in, but responding to an incident in which a gentleman was on his 5th offense drunk driving charge. It should not have been on the road at all. He was just having difficulty standing, and likely as he was driving on Highway 12 or on Highway 51, were it not for this agency's intervention, I feel would have killed somebody, right? If you restrict this agency or revert, or if we continue as is with the sort of reflective pause that we're in right now, the officers are not going to engage somebody like that in a pursuit, and will not try to have a safe outcome by, okay, we're only going 10 miles an hour, but that's still a pursuit. Let's radio for a tire deflation device ahead. Let's try to render a safe outcome here. That is not happening right now. And so my concern is that as we work with the second largest city in the state, who has a very restrictive policy, and they can't go after these very dangerous individuals, and again, I really don't like this whole, like, you know, fear sort of as a motivator, so I'm trying to be cautious here. But I'm concerned that we're going to see a lot worse driving behavior than we already are. We're going to see a lot more reckless behavior than we already are. And I think that we've actually done a decent job of curbing a lot of that behavior. And when I say sort of the streets are talking, and I get some feedback, of course, from people, some of the colorful language I use, because I want people to really hear me, and I try to use words that really captivate the attention of folks. When I say the streets are talking, that's body camera footage of us getting information from people that we arrest after pursuits that say, I should have known doing that in Monona, or I should have, I realized that you were Monona, so I stopped, right? I think that we can be proud of the fact that people are stopping, even though we have 59 cases, people are stopping that may not have stopped if they weren't in Monona. And that may or may not answer your question, Alder, because I'm really trying to be delicate about speaking to other agency policies. The Lexipol policy that we had, that Alder Rademacher referenced, that you all spent, this community has spent $89,000 in revamping this agency's policies, is a professional police policy that is utilized by dozens of agencies in this state, hundreds across the country. And what's good for Madison doesn't necessarily mean it's good for Monona. I would venture to say I'd probably still work for that city if that was the case, if I believed that, right? We are unique here. And I like the fact that we were able to have these discussions and make changes and continuously grow and adapt to things that we need to adapt to, which is great. But I really think that although we appreciate what is happening in Madison, we're not Madison. We can't operate like Madison. Dane County, and I love Madison. I put my life on the line for Madison for 19 years. I moved here for Madison, right? We're not necessarily operating like the Dane County deputies, who are, you might have one deputy that is miles away from their backup because of how big this county is. And they have to operate differently than we do here in Monona, because we do have backup relatively readily available from an outside agency, McFarland or State Patrol or whomever. So I don't want to throw numbers out. I think that the media has done their own inquiry as to other agencies' pursuit policies, how many pursuit those agencies have been involved in. I will tell you that we are a proactive agency. We have a stretch of the Beltline in Highway 51 that We engage a lot of dangerous driving behaviors because that's what this community expects us to do. We're not like Verona, for example. We're not like Cottage Grove, for example. We are geographically placed differently and have our own set of joys, yet challenges in our placement here. That's sort of, I apologize, Alder Moore, I can't get directly to what I think you're trying to get at, but I was trying to answer it the best I could.
No, that's fine. I mean, I certainly didn't expect you to recite what every other department does, or to imply that, to imply that Monona should do what other departments do. I was just trying to get a sense of how divergent our policy is from everybody else, since at least in social media, if not elsewhere, the impression of some is that our policy is very, very different than everybody else's. So I appreciate the response, and again, I'm not questioning the policy. I was on the council when we passed the policy, and I have, full faith in our department's ability to have the judgment and the training to chase when it's necessary and stop when it's not, or not start if it's not. But I just wanted to ask that question. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Alder Bernstein.
You've raised kind of a litany of things that have been the result of these stops. But we don't know if any of those apply to this instance. We don't know if there were drugs or guns or anything of that sort. That has not been made clear.
Are you saying you don't know or I don't know?
We, on the
Okay.
council, don't know that.
That's fair.
So until we know that, I mean, it seems premature to just reinstall or reinitiate the pursuit policy until we know if there's been a tragic mistake here.
What your police chief is telling you that your officers did not make a mistake, and that your officers abided by law. And I mean that with all sincerity and respect, that I'm not identifying this as a mistake. I'm calling this a tragedy, and that the driver's actions resulted in death. But what I've seen and what I know in the video, and what I know eventually will come out, is that I know how far our officer was away from the vehicle, for example, at the time of impact or when it crashed. I know the officer's actions in trying to, in his positioning behind the vehicle as it reached high speeds, and some of the strategy the officer engaged to try to encourage the individual to not put the pedal to the ground, right? However, there are a lot of details, Alder, that I wish you can, not that, I don't know where you're at. I wish you had the details that I have.
I do too.
Of course you do, as every member of the public does. But I have to respect the process. And part of respecting the process is to, respect DOJ and withhold information, not to say that it's not going to be shared or revealed, but that they are actively investigating. And I don't want to hinder their investigation.
No, neither do I. But I think it's premature to reinitiate the initial policy, the existing policy, because we don't have that information, and we can't adequately review the policy to see if it needs amending or revision until we know what happened here.
What I will tell you is that you have the act, as DOJ, the Department of Justice, has indicated, Alder, and although they didn't elaborate and go into detail, I was trying to give you hypotheticals as examples of this. What they did share in their latest update was the act of reckless driving.
They shared what now?
The violation and act of reckless driving.
They added that to this incident.
Yes.
DOJ has now said that this was an act of reckless driving.
That the reason for the traffic stop was. Not that this was an act of, but that the reason for the traffic stop.
Well, that's a little more confusing to me than helpful, I think.
Alder Rademacher?
Yeah, I hope it's okay just to, could I ask a question? So there's, I think over here, there's the policy, and then there's officers
Right.
following or not
Right.
following the policy,
Right.
which are two very different things, right?
Absolutely,
So it's not-
absolutely. I'm
so
talking
it's
about
not
the
our-
policy, but I think there's been talk about whether or not we're judging the officer. I'm not
Well,
doing
we're-
that.
That's what we're not, we're just, we're.
I'm focusing on the policy.
Okay. Because would it, why would it matter if we had the information that you are hoping?
Why would it matter? I think it would be incredibly helpful to know if
Why?
there's something in the policy that could be amended or revised to avoid this kind of tragedy.
But no matter what
I
policy
mean, we could just stop for the
have-
police, and
Yeah.
then,
What?
we could just stop for the police, and then that tragedy probably
Sure,
would have happened.
Patrick, that's true. That's true. And obviously, there's a lot of reasons why people flee the police.
Right,
A lot of them are because of what they see on TV,
right,
how they get treated if they do stop.
yep,
So there's a general fear of the police, and in some cases, it can be justified.
yep.
I'm not saying that's the case here, but it's certainly the case in many places.
True.
So I would love it if everyone stopped for the police, and I would love it if no one got hurt when they did that. So that's, to me, is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is this pursuit policy that has resulted in the death of 3 individuals. And if there's something we can do about the pursuit policy, we should do it. But until then, I don't think we should continue this policy because I don't want to see any more loss of life.
I mean, Alder, I would just, I would just state that or it appears that you're casting blame of the incident on our pursuit policy. We're
I'm
not-
saying we are investigating what happened,
Mhm.
and I'd like to know the results of that investigation
Mhm.
so that I can make an informed decision on what, if any, changes we need to make to the pursuit policy.
Alder
I'm
DePula,
not
would you like to
second guessing the
continue?
officer.
Alder DePula had the floor, okay?
He asked me a question.
That's okay. It's okay. It doesn't need to be, it's just, I feel like we're talking about the decision of the mayor and the chief to temporarily pause the policy while we review it. It is the purview of the mayor and the chief to change that or to.
Right, and
you know.
she's asked for our input,
Yeah.
and that's why it's on the agenda
But I would like
today.
to, but I'm not done yet. I would like to counsel you that you are able to, if you would like, to propose something to the council
Yeah.
at some point to officially have this body act on something instead of, you know what I mean? Like you're able to do that. You could.
Sure,
Mhm.
and I guess what I'm trying to say is not to reinitialize the pursuit policy
Mhm.
until we
But do you
have
want
all
to make a
the.
proposal about that, is what we're saying?
Yes.
You want to propose a resolution to say that? That someone would
Sure.
have to second, and then we would vote on? That's,
Okay, I would like to move that we not reinitiate the pursuit policy as originally constituted, and to keep the pause in place until we have the facts of the investigation by DCI.
do you have that, Aline?
I have a question.
Is there, just a minute, is there a second?
Without a second, we cannot discuss it.
True.
I will second the motion.
Okay. All right. Now you can ask your
Now we
question.
can discuss it.
Okay.
So, Alder Bernstein, am I understanding you correctly that, so you feel that we cannot know whether the policy we have is a good policy
Right.
until we know whether the officer was following the policy?
Well, that's certainly one aspect of it. That's
Okay.
been addressed by the police chief in terms of his internal investigation. But I guess I would like to know the facts about that as much as anything, which
Mhm.
we don't have at our behest. But more importantly, I'm looking at what we might be able to do to the policy itself before we reinstitute it.
Right.
So there are two separate questions, but I'm feeling like we don't have enough answers yet to make any kind of judgment of our own.
Would it be possible to return to the policy and continue to look at it in ways that might compare it to the previous policy or policies of other communities or other ideas that you might have?
I certainly hope that we do some level of investigation. I haven't heard anyone say that that's going to be happening.
Mm.
But my preference is that we examine the pursuit policy once we have the DCI investigation available to us.
Could. Okay.
And I think that's my motion.
So that would be a little bit of a different motion?
No, I think that is my motion.
Oh,
No.
No, that's not your motion.
so
Want to
if,
reread his motion, Elaine?
sure. Because I would agree with that, what you just said, but I think it's different.
Sorry. I'll move that we not reinstate the pursuit policy until we've received the results from the DOI investigation.
Okay.
Does it make sense to have a different motion?
Well, first of all, we're discussing this motion.
first.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
So does anybody else have anything to say about this motion? Alder Moore?
Thank you. I would just say that as written, it seems to me that the motion doesn't really put the ball forward, which is to say, if it's saying we're not doing anything with the policy until the report comes out, well, the day after the report comes out, we could reinstitute policy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't say anything about, after the report comes out and there's a review by Public Safety Committee, or the report comes out and the council brings it up again or anything. It just says we can't do anything until the report comes out, number one. And number two, so you might want to consider amending your, if I understand your intent, Alder Bernstein, you might want to consider amending the motion to address that piece. I guess the other thing is that I want to go back to what Alder Rademacher said, which is I fail to see how the results of this investigation, regardless of what the results are, impact or has an impact on the policy. I mean,
Really?
it might have an impact on, depending on the results. It could have an impact on the force. It could have an impact on the individuals on the force, or for that matter, the other agencies that were involved. But I fail to see how the policy itself could be illuminated or altered in any way based on this singular incident, however tragic it was, and it was incredibly tragic. So I think there's a difference. There's a difference there. And third, I would just say, again, speaking to this motion, I hope we all recognize, and Alder Bernstein, since you made the motion, especially you recognize, that in not reinstituting the policy until, if in fact this motion were passed, by not reinstituting the policy as written, you in fact would be endangering citizens at least at equal or of similar, similarly as what just occurred. I mean, what just occurred obviously is a tragedy, but to go back to something that Alder DePula said, it sounds like you're saying the policy was at fault here, when in reality, there was a cause of, I mean, the police just didn't take off after these individuals for no cause, and they didn't stop when and cooperate when the police asked them to. So I guess I just want to be clear that if we were to hold back, which I'm quite certain is why the chief and the mayor are considering reinstituting the policy, if we were to hold back on its reinstitution for however long it takes the Department of Justice, and then one presumes if you alter the amendment, our own further discussion after the DOJ report is repeated, that's an extended period of time where you would indeed be putting individuals at risk in not having the policy.
Alderwood?
Yeah. I agree the policy and our officers' behavior here and whether they follow the policy are two separate things completely. We've adopted this policy. We've been working with it for a year and a half or so. I think the chief gave a lot of good reasons, some of the benefits of it. We know there are the tragic consequences here. But I think if you want public safety to take another look at it, I think you're on public safety, right?
Yeah.
You could bring it up there, but not to look at this incident in particular, but the spreadsheet of the 59 stops in 2023 and other previous data. If you have, if you want to do that, that would make more sense to me than focusing on the rights and wrongs, if you will, of this particular incident. So, the mayor clearly has the authority to put temporary pauses on policy, but it is our policy, and, at some point, well, we're going to vote on it, I guess, whether to continue it, but I guess I do have to bring up a point of order. This is on for new business, for discussion and possible action. So he's proposing action, so I think we need to suspend the rules, don't we? I mean, otherwise, because so I think that's the first procedural step that has to happen before we do anything.
So are you saying we should remake the motion?
I think we need a motion whether to suspend the rules and take it out of order first.
And then we'll have Alder Holmquist speak after that? Or can he speak now?
Oh, it's up to you. You're the chair.
Alder Holmquist, why don't you say what you're going to say?
Chief,
we can always go back through the procedure.
Can you tell us the DOJ's investigation is not an investigation that is even going to mention or evaluate or assess our policy, correct?
DOJ is going to make sure that we were obeying the law, the officers were using due regard, and they are aware of our policy and what information they put in their report. I'm not privy to, nor do I know. I know that our policy is a legal policy, and it is the policy of numerous other agencies throughout the state.
Because they're going to look into, are you behaving underneath the state statutes?
Correct.
And so this policy is within state statute. The DOJ's report is not going to be referencing our policy, because that's this body's policy. they don't have jurisdiction over the analysis of our policy.
Correct.
Therefore, that report won't give us insight into our policy.
I do not know what DOJ is going to put in their report, but I would argue that your point is correct, and that they're going to be looking at the crash and statute.
City Administrator, how do you think we should handle this? Can we have the motion to take this out of order and vote on that motion, and then go ahead with the motion as it's been made? Or do we have to have a new motion?
I think to be, I guess to be totally clear and transparent, Mayor, I would concede the fact that maybe a motion to go out of order would be in order. Normally, a policy referral change would come from committee. It would come through committee first, so I guess the action would be maybe, I guess at the end of the day, appropriate action, if it was the desire of this body to actually make a change to the policy, would be to refer it back to committee for review. In terms of if there is no action, essentially, the existing policy is in effect under the temporary restriction by the mayor, and the mayor may lift it at her discretion at this point. So I think if there is to be a change in policy to be evaluated, that is the specific action that could be referred to committee. If we were going to follow normal procedures, I think if council, I guess I don't know if council would be in a position to simply try to amend the policy without it going through committee. I think it would certainly want to try. I think normal procedures would be to bring such a change through, refer to a committee, and then bring that recommendation forward to council.
I guess my
So
question, what do you think we should do about the situation with the current motion that's on the floor and we did not vote to take it out of order first? Because we probably need to dispose of that in some way, right?
Yeah, I guess I would actually probably, I guess, ask the first and the second to withdraw their motion and then to actually put a new motion out there to take it out of order. I think would probably be my suggestion.
What do you think?
Sure.
So I'll withdraw my second.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay. Got all that, Elaine? Now, if someone wants to make a motion about something, first of all, we need to take it out of order, even though we don't actually have the motion. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so, because it's on for discussion and possible action, and apparently action is going to be proposed. So I think to follow, I agree with the administrator. I think the cleanest way is just to go ahead and vote to take it out of order or not.
We could just say the following motion out of order. Is that?
Yeah, sure, yeah. Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
Does someone want to make, well, assuming someone has a motion they'd like to make, does someone want to make the motion to take it out of order? And then make it?
Sure, yes, I would like to be able to take this out of order. So you're asking me to restate the motion?
Just to take it out of order.
Right now, we're
Take it
just
out of
taking it
order.
out of order.
Okay.
Then you're going to need to restate the motion.
So I have to make a motion to take it out of order?
Yes.
Okay, I move that we take the motion I'm about to make out of order.
And I'll second.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
All right.
Nay.
Aye.
Nay.
Alder Moore? I'm sorry, you're in mute.
Apologies, nay.
Nay. So do we have a tie?
Yep.
3-3, thank you, guys. Yeah. I'm going to say nay. I think if we can certainly, well, it's done now, I guess.
There's no reason that public safety can't take this up if they so
No.
desire,
Right.
separate from any direction from the
Okay.
council.
But I would like to say one further point. And Doug, I do also sympathize with your point about public safety if we don't reinstitute the policy, but I also believe nobody should die for reckless driving. And that, to me, we know 3 people died, and we have to do everything we can to prevent that from happening. So however best people think that can be accomplished, that's still, I think, the first order of business for the council. And I hope that we take that seriously and we just don't go back to the status quo. Because I think we need to really examine this in light of the incident that happened, not the 57 other stops. That can be analyzed as well, but not to analyze what happened on January 1st would be a dereliction of duty, as I see it, as a member of the council. That's my piece.
Alder Rademacher?
Rick, you're my friend, you're my neighbor. I'm going to be going to your daughter's wedding in a couple weeks with pleasure. People die all the time from reckless driving. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Okay, okay. So we are trying to prevent deaths from reckless driving, but I know what you're getting at.
Right.
I do.
Okay, Alder Dupula.
One last thing. Driving at excessive speed is reckless driving. Fleeing from the police is reckless driving. And I think our police department was trying to prevent that from happening. That's it.
Anyone else? Would anyone else like to take something out of order to make a different motion? Okay, well then, this can certainly be brought up at public safety if the chair decides to do so. But in the meantime, I am going to be talking to the chief about how to go about reinstituting the policy as it's written. And it's not to say this can't be revisited, so thank you, Chief.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Item D. Consideration of Resolution 24-1-2666, approving a lease with Monona Grove School District for the use of Maywood School. This is put forth by the Park and Recreation Director. Missy, do you have a few things to explain about this? I think most of us have heard that this was coming.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The room really does clear out when Park and Rec comes on board. We'll keep it brief. This is for the lease agreement for Maywood School. As the Mayor mentioned, we have been in talks with this plan for quite some time now. It does impact our 2024 budget and beyond. It is for a current 5-year lease of the Maywood School, which would allow us to provide care for additional after-school, summer camp, and 4-day wrap care by having the use of this building and moving some of our ancillary programs off-site as well from the community center, which would allow the addition of more
Sorry,
senior.
folks, could you have your conversations outside? Yeah. Thank you.
Which would then allow for additional programming in the community center for the senior center use. So if you have any questions at this time, I would like to address them if you have them. But I think it is a pretty straightforward lease put together by the school district and our attorney, Bill Cole.
And I think this was based on the lease that they had with Maestro Mundo, is that correct?
Correct, with revisions.
Okay, and Alder Wood, did you have anything you'd like to add about it?
Sure. I mean, my understanding is we are paying way, way, way less than or Madison Schools
Significantly
Yeah.
less.
for the lease. So it may be, it's similar in other ways, but not, we're paying $5,000 a month for most of the school, and it really will give us an opportunity to expand summer day camp and the after-school and before-school programs, and will be at least revenue neutral, if not better.
Correct. Sustained by after-school and summer camp.
It's a 5-year term, which was something we wanted instead of 3. Yeah, I think it's an excellent use of that facility instead of having it sit empty, and it also gives more opportunities to figure out what to do with the community center when that day comes.
The real carrot for the school district was the additional 4K option to make it equitable between the school district. Cottage Grove's currently offering 4K wrap as part of their program. Winnequa School does not have a program, which would be something that we would offer in conjunction with them. So really helping the residents out in multiple ways.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And as I've said before, my agreement with Director Anderson has always been in terms of these after-school care programs, or now 4K, is that it has to bring in enough revenue to cover the cost, that we are not going to be paying for this out of taxpayer dollars. And indeed, these programs have they've done really well. So that hasn't been an issue. Anyone have any other questions for Missy? I think the school board is going to be considering this.
The 24th.
The 24th, okay, and then we'll be bringing it back again on the 3rd. Alder Rademacher, did you have something? No? Okay. All right, we will move on to the final item, E, discussion of future staffing requests put forth by the Finance and Personnel Committee. Neil, do you want to address, well, I've got some sheets to hand out, and then Neil, if you'd like to do a little bit of an introduction about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, this is a topic we've been looking at, and certainly in terms of, primarily in terms of referendum planning, but also facility planning going forward. So we've asked department heads to bring forth, actually, I think even prior to me coming on board, there was a discussion or a request that was originally brought forward. Certainly in conversation with department heads, that list, I think was probably back in October, I think we came up with, there was about 17 positions that had been identified by a variety of departments as potential for consideration going forward in the context of both the referendum planning as well as the capital facility planning. Staff has since presented that list to Finance and Personnel Committee. We've had a couple of times before them. We've kind of tried to establish some sort of priority listing, just as a tool to be reviewed. Alder Moore, these were emailed to you here right at the beginning if you haven't gotten that email. So just to make sure that you had received those are the 2 documents we'll kind of be referring to. So essentially what we tried to do is we broke the positions into priority positions, additional positions for near term, and then a long-term evaluation positions. So for planning purposes, we did that 0 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, and then 6+ years. Again, just really for planning purposes at this point. So the sheet that you have in front of you, we broke each one of those individual categories is broken down into general government and public safety positions. Finance Director Houdeker has gone through and broken out the estimated costs by wage, FICA, WRS, insurance, and the other benefits to give us a total estimated cost for that, each one of those positions. So again, we wanted to try to come up with some sort of grouping and prioritization for consideration by the council. There's certainly always the ability to move these in and out, or in terms of whether or not they are even included at all in the discussion. We wanted to kind of get an initial list. This list is still being evaluated by Finance and Personnel, just to be clear. We had hoped to maybe have a recommendation from them this evening. However, there's some additional information they would like to still consider before that. Since we had it on the agenda, we did at least want to bring it forward and introduce that list to the council as it currently stands, to get if there's any feedback or comment that can be provided to certainly to staff and maybe for Finance and Personnel as they come back in a couple weeks to maybe do one last review of the list and understand those. So with that, I'm certainly available to answer any questions.
Do you want to address, or maybe Mark, you can address this estimated impact worksheet as well? just so they know what we're talking about when we go into it more detail later.
Sure.
Maybe it's
You have that available in front of you, just kind of walk
Yeah.
through it. So there's a couple categories. The compensation plan, which we talked about last meeting. What that increase would be $74 on the average house. COLA for current employees, which is $82. Garbage and recycling right now, since it's use fund balance for that, that'd be $47. That's keeping the same process we have now every 2 weeks. If you look at the very bottom, it says other options. So we could recycling, if you wanted that, that's something you're curious about. That's additional $16 per average house. Non-personnel, that's like training, billing, maintenance, a lot of just personnel costs. We really have never really adjusted personnel in a long time, increased contracts. So that's related to that. That's probably the bigger one at $98. Expanding our IT service, just a lot of new subscriptions that we have to pay for. We want additional time from our current provider. So that's for $35 per average house. So that equals $331 per an average house currently. Then if you go to the new employees, the priority position, so that's based on, I don't know if you have that worksheet in front of you, so that'd be the priority positions. Those would be $256 added on. In the near term, would be $61 to get a grand total of $648 just for the operating portion. Then you add in the city campus building at $40 million roughly. And this is a fluctuating number. So $583, so $1,231. Would that be the actual increase in the public safety building in the operating, depending on what method you take for the new employee position.
So these are just things to keep in mind as we make some decisions going forward about this new staffing request. The compensation discussion is going to come to you at the next meeting, a further discussion about what was presented last week. We still have some things the Finance and Personnel wants to talk about there before they send it on to council. So we just wanted to give you an introduction to the staffing request. See if you had any questions. So that
I guess if you had questions for like a staff member, I don't see them really here. See who's available at the next meeting, make sure I'll have them show up anyways. Because you probably have questions what these new employees are all for, questions about them. So we should have those people, employees at the next meeting, department managers.
Alder Rademacher.
Mark, could you just once again quickly explain on the handout called Estimated Impact Worksheet, the item non-personnel, can you explain again what that means?
That's a lot of our contracts, training, just non-personnel stuff. So
You can't use the word in the definition of the word, come on.
Yeah, so you got a lot of different contracts.
Always sick, sorry.
We are increasing just our buildings and maintenance accounts right behind, just for general, like our, just a couple instances, like our mechanic, the reply salary account, usually we're over about, 10,000 per year.
Okay.
So there's a lot of accounts that really need to be trued up to what they really should be. So we don't run into, get those where they should be, and not having to cut services for them.
Okay.
Just kind of two things. We've kept the budget for non-personnel costs like at 0% increase for like 3 or 4 years, and this past year it was 1. But Mark, does this also include health insurance increases, or where would they fall if it
It'd
doesn't?
be under the second line, the COLA increase.
Oh, just under current employees? Okay.
Yeah.
Alder Wood.
So, yeah, just to follow up on that, it might be a good idea to be able to give us a listing maybe next time of sort of what at least the bigger items are in that line for non-personnel.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just a comment, I can't remember now if this was, Neil, in your presentation to the council or to finance and personnel, but you had sort of a ranking of the priorities for things to go in the referendum, operating referendum, with the first being the comp plan and the COLA for current employees, the non-personnel cost. There we go. Wow. Okay. Read my mind. And then funding new positions
That's the end.
is at the end. And, you know, so I think we've already cut all those ones, or not cut, but pushed off into the future, all the ones in red at the bottom at finance and personnel.
These have all been pushed off, okay.
Yeah. So it really, to me, it gets down to a question of both the need for the positions, also where they would be housed, and but ultimately, can we afford it, or can we ask the taxpayers to pay as much as, you know, $1,231 on the average or median home? So I think because this is, I know it's a ton to get thrown at you at a.
Yeah.
I've had this for a while, so you know, it does take a while for it to filter the information, but I guess as you do that and look at those positions, I would just encourage you to kind of keep the big picture in mind of how much are we going to ask the taxpayers.
Yeah. Alder Moore.
Mayor Alder Moore, yep, thank you.
Thank you. I guess two things, Alder Wood just, I think, referenced one thing that I would be curious, aside from wanting to talk to the supervisors, as Mark pointed out, around these particular positions and why they're needed, having them available at the next meeting. The other thing is, that Alder Wood just mentioned is, like, particularly as it relates to the public safety positions, I mean, I'm assuming that we don't have any room, we're busting out at the seams with our current facility, so we wouldn't even be looking to adding these positions for another 3 years, probably, by the time, 3, maybe 4 even, by the time we get a building built and can accommodate, right? So why are we?
I think I would say that with that, for instance, adding 3 or 4 additional firefighters, we would not be doing that before we had a new building. However, I think we can certainly hire one to serve as a floater. We do have capacity for that. So some, you know, not all the public safety positions are dependent on having a new building to have room for them. The same thing with the additional traffic and crime prevention officer. You know, we would have room for. So, and the police supervisor is actually a current position. They would just be increasing the responsibilities of that position. So that's, you know, if that helps at all.
Yeah, and I would just say, just as a point of reference, and I want to give credit where credit is due, I recognize this is a really big number, and I'm not dismissing that at all. But you know, Alder DePula pointed out over the course of the last couple of weeks, as we were talking about this referendum and these needs, these real needs that we have as a city, that when you take that kind of an increase and divide it over 12 months, which is really the value that every single one of these positions are providing, you know, the positions and the increases that we're talking about in terms of the salaries that we talked about last week and the public safety building. When you think about that increase in taxes, as much as it's covering, you know, on a month-to-month basis, it seems like a pretty extraordinary value.
Alder Rademacher.
Yeah, just to clarify, at the top of each section where it talks about immediate need, near-term need, that just, the way I'm interpreting that would be when we would hope to have these positions in
Yes.
place. Okay.
Got it. So if we were to ask for all the positions, say up until the long-term evaluation positions, we're
Sure.
not asking for that. But if we were to ask for the other ones, we need to figure out a way to communicate that, which is one of the reasons we are working with a communications firm about this referendum, how that would be spread over X number of years in terms of the hiring.
Yeah, okay.
And that, I mean, I don't know if you remember the school district referendum last year. That was sort of set up,
Yeah.
totally different items that they were asking for money for, but that was set up as something that would take place in increments over years.
Is it premature to ask for position descriptions?
Didn't they provided those, didn't they?
Did I miss that?
I don't think it's in our packet.
Oh,
I
okay.
think we had it
Yeah, they exist, yeah.
in a,
Yes, okay.
maybe it was just in the finance packet where.
That might have been when you talked to the department heads originally, are you thinking?
They gave us a list, yeah, of all the asks that described the positions and what they would do. So that's, I
Yeah,
think.
I do believe those were, we can bring those back up and
Yeah.
update
Yeah.
them.
That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
They aren't necessarily position descriptions,
Yeah.
but.
Roughly, yeah.
But they'll
Brief
just-
narratives on the justification for the position.
Yeah.
I do believe there was some justification provided by department heads.
Yeah. And some of these are additional, for instance, park labor. Well, we already
Yeah.
have that, you know,
Right.
so. But yeah, I think the justifications, will include that in the packet
Yeah.
next week.
I'm also looking at like the very top item, part-time planner.
Mhm.
Would that be equivalent to what Thor is?
It would be, could be either extending his hours.
There you have it.
Yeah.
That was my question.
It would be the
We could just have
equivalent of what
one
Thor's
full-time
doing.
or another
Right.
part-time. Got it, okay.
Right. And how that would actually come about is, you know, kind of depend on what he would like to do and
Okay.
whatever.
Got it.
Anyone else, any other questions?
I think mine's maybe simple. Like, when will we get, I mean, one is understanding the justification of these, but when is a decision of, yes, this is the list, or here's the partial list?
We would like to have a decision by the end of February, correct, Brian? Because we need a number
Okay.
for to start working on the referendum question.
Got it.
And to be clear, these are obviously for planning purposes for the referendum. And again, there's still obviously budget approvals, other things that would still need to move forward in order for those to actually be moved forward.
Right.
Similarly with the compensation plan, that'll be coming forward. Recommendation from staff will probably accept or adopt the actual strategy, depending on what finance committee wishes to do. And then actually there will be a series of steps that will still be required to actually implement that plan. So, but this is essentially setting the direction for staff to begin to proceed on those, Alder.
And of course, it's all dependent on whether or not we pass the referendum.
Right.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
Alder DePula, I'm sorry.
No,
Brian,
I'm
did you have
good,
something
I'm
else?
good.
No,
Patrick?
and we did talk about personnel and finance that, we wanted to prioritize existing employees.
Right.
Who gotta make decisions, so.
We know we badly need
Yep.
these additional positions, but certainly doing something about compensation for our existing current employees is the most important. Any other questions? We will get that information with the rationale to you in the next packet, and we'll have more time to discuss it then. It'll just be on for first read at that point. At least that's what we're planning, unless we decide to handle it differently. It certainly won't be any sooner than that, so, any sooner than end of February.
I guess,
Okay.
Mayor, we certainly, just one quick comment, Mayor,
Sure.
is obviously we understand there's a lot of data, and there's the reason we're kind of trying to give it to you up front without a lot of the discussion that certainly finance is having, is that we did want you to make sure to have an advanced look at some of the information. So as we go through the standard first and second read process, you've had additional opportunity to read through some of this information and come up with questions, so.
You know,
We
and Neil,
apologize for being a little stretched out more than usual, but we wanted to make sure that council had adequate time to have. And again, obviously, things being tied together and being somewhat contingent upon each other in some cases, we wanted to make sure you had more of a complete picture when you're making your decision, so.
and Neil, how about talking to, because I think Leah put all this information together, let's send the council the rationale for the position requests within the next week or so. We have 3 weeks till the next council member that meeting. That way you have some time to, you're not just reading it the day
Absolutely.
before or something.
Thank you.
Okay.
Will do, Mayor, no problem.
Alderwood?
I had one other data request. When you show the cost, the impact on the average or median home, if we could get what the existing local taxes are for those median homes, so we know what kind of percentage increase we're talking about.
Absolutely, easy to add that,
Yeah.
no problem.
Okay. Anything else, Alderwood?
The additional add would be cost per thousand, or cost, like,
No, right?
the
Per
median
thousand
home
value,
helps,
Alder?
but the cost per thousand is helpful to help communicate to people.
Okay.
Absolutely. Will do.
Anything else? Okay, well then we will move on to reports of committees, commissions, et cetera. First item, updates and discussion on DEI efforts. Does anyone have anything to report? Alderwood?
Yeah, the Parks Board meeting, we got the annual report on the skating rink, and there were a number of things that they are doing, including free Tuesday night skates, so that if you can't afford to skate, you can come and get in free and get a free rental of skates. That's been a very popular attraction on a night when frankly they're generally not very busy. And also, they've also done events, or at least one event with ice skating with Gigi's Playhouse. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Alder Bernstein?
I'm working with the library. We have scheduled a exhibit called Freedom Summer. Took place in 1964 when a lot of people from the north went down to Mississippi to help with voter recruitment. And we've also more recently secured Michael Edmonds, who is the author of a book about risking everything, about members of the state of Wisconsin who went down not only to do that recruitment effort in terms of voting, but then went down a second time to collect the archival papers of a lot of the organizations that were there that are now housed at the Wisconsin Historical Society. So he'll talk about his book. I think we've scheduled that for February 10th instead of the 11th, which I understand there's a big football game that day. So Michael will be there to sign his book and to talk about the exhibit.
Was he the archives librarian?
He was.
Or, right,
yes,
at
he was
historical?
in charge of archives for a long time.
Yeah. Anyone else? Teresa?
I've got something, yeah. Today, January 16th, for our awareness, this is the National Day of Racial Healing. I just thought that was something I myself was not aware of, so I share with others. Also coming up, we've got in the coming weeks, World Religion Day on the 21st of January. On the 27th, the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And then that takes us to the end of January. February starts Black History Month.
All right. Anyone else? Any updates on sustainability efforts?
Mayor, I'll just add that the City of Monona newsletter came out today, so you'll see this in the newsletter, but just a reminder that Sustain Dane is featuring Monona in their All Around Dane County series, and that is happening on February 15th at 5:30, sort of happy hour. February 15th at Fratelli's. So everyone is invited.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, moving on to committee reports. I guess first of all, Chief, did you have anything you wanted to say? Or Officer Hoffman?
Already checked the room.
Okay. City Administrator?
No report, Mayor.
Okay. Alder Bernstein?
No report.
Alder Rademacher?
No report?
Alder Wood?
No report.
Do you
Oh,
wanna
I'm
do
sorry,
the-
Aline.
Do you want to do the TIF thing now?
Oh, that's right.
Thank you.
Glad
Somebody
you
reminded.
remembered that.
Yes, City Planner Plowman notified me that the Joint Review Board had met and approved the TIF 10, and apparently there is a requirement that the City Council be notified of that within 7 days, so this is your notification. I hope that satisfies the requirement.
You have been served.
Yeah. Alder Holmquist?
No report.
Alder DePula?
Just wanted to expand a little bit on what Doug was talking about, the ice skating rink. Just wanted to mention that they're just crushing it in this past year with $139,829 in revenue.
Wow.
Which is way up from last year. And they've actually, so with $139,829 in revenue, they've got $136,406 in expenses, so they're positive.
Wow.
Which is great, and that's up from, I think they did about 90, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was about $96,000 last year. So that's
That was
pretty.
2 years
2 years
ago.
ago, so it's a pretty significant increase.
Yeah.
And just the level of work that Parks has been doing down there, it just looks beautiful. I mean, everyone's seen it. It's a jewel of the community, really.
It really is.
And so I just wanted to shout out to Parks for just the level of attention and detail that they've focused in that
I was
spot.
just talking to a friend of mine who lives at the current overlooking the rink. Nothing but
Oh, yeah.
fantastic things to say about it. Just wonderful.
And then the only other report I have is I got to spend the entire day with our Public Works Department plowing snow. And it was enlightening in a number of ways about how many, just driving that 10-foot wide thing with the wing on it and then trying to maneuver around some of our circles when people aren't getting off the street during snow emergencies is definitely difficult for our crews to manage. But they did it with care and took extra time, and it was just a really great, and honestly, after spending time, I don't want to diss other communities, but spending time in Sun Prairie today, I mean, our roads are way better than Sun Prairie's. You hear that, Sun Prairie?
So, not joking, just before this meeting, I was speaking with someone out in the hallway with these two as well, and she said, if it just comes up, could you mention how well the snowplows are doing? I mean, just out of the blue, she said that, and she commented that she drives into Madison every day for work, and, it's just so noticeably different.
Yeah, and I can't say enough that we use half the salt that McFarland does, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we use like 180 tons versus their 400 and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's just a really good job by our Public Works Department.
Yeah, I actually spent some time, watching the Packer game with some neighbors, and they told me, be sure you tell the Public Works Department what a great job we think they're
That's
doing
awesome.
on
Yes.
the roads, so I need to pass it on to Dan. Alder Moore?
Thank you. A couple of things. One is, the primary thing is that Snow State Games, originally scheduled for the 28th, has been rescheduled. It was to be this month, and it's been rescheduled for March 2nd. And if we, from 1 to 5, it's in Damiano, and if we do not have snow, Bill Quackenbush, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, will be sharing some other games that don't require snow, but we're keeping our fingers crossed that we'll have snow, and again, so it's been rescheduled to March 2nd. Second, I just wanted to give a shout out to Doug Plowman, staff member Doug Plowman, planner Doug Plowman, and the rest of the city staff, as well as the Plan Commission and the CDA. It's so great to see the shovels in the ground on all three projects. And, it's just been a long haul to get there. a lot of review and a lot of due diligence on everyone's part, and it's super exciting. And then the third thing is, I can't help but notice, like, honestly, that our city administrator, with his headset on and his backdrop, is really in a broadcasting booth. He's really, and so, I just wanted to say, hope you're feeling better, and go Pack.
Let's go, Pack, go.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you, Alder. I am considering myself as a walking public service announcement for if you have not gotten vaccinated, please go do so. You do not want to deal with this, so it's not fun. So
He's got COVID.
Yeah.
And Mark is sick too.
I've had 5
We don't know, he doesn't have it so far.
I'm sorry to hear it, Neil. I didn't know you were homesick.
Aline, did you have anything to say about the elections?
I do, yes.
Okay.
We will have a primary on February 20th. Absentee ballots will be sent out by January 30th. And then in-person voting is the 6th through the 16th at City Hall.
And then will there be like a candidate forum and things like that?
Keep an eye on the website for
MESPA
updates. But
sent
I
something
think
out.
Mesba sent something, yeah.
will,
yeah.
our plan.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's up to the league, not
Well, we
us.
asked the league to
Got it.
got
it.
moderate, but there's also some talk about, I know that Will's definitely talking about one for March, for the April election, but there's also been some talk about possibly having some kind of a forum before the primary. And I'm not sure where
I haven't heard.
that stands.
It'll be on our website if they have one.
So, well, you'll be notified if they have one, because
Well, you guys
you
should.
need to know, yeah. Okay, I just had, obviously, would like to thank Public Works. They put in many, many, many long hours in the past week, and now it looks like it's all going to be rained on next week anyway. And then the other thing, just to remind people that the San Damiano Steering Committee is holding the public information meeting tomorrow night, presentation of the final plan for San Damiano, so please come out. We're going to be recording it. I was not sure if we'd be able to stream it or not, I'm not sure. But you would be able to watch it later at least with a recording. So it starts at 6:30 at the high school. We'll probably run until about 8. If there's nothing else, there aren't any appointments. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Yes.
Yep.